Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves.
Welcome back to Careers in Discovery. Today I'm joined by Josef Christensen, Chief Operating Officer at ImmuneAGE Bio. Welcome, Josef.
Hello. Glad to be here. Thank you.
I can't wait to dig into your story, but I suppose the best place to start is to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at the moment with ImmuneAGE Bio.
Yeah, so ImmuneAGE Bio works in the field of immune regeneration. And so as we age, like any organ in the body, you'll see sort of functional decline. You see the exact same thing with the immune system. The older you are, the less the functionality or the performance is. And so, we're asking the question, can you sort of turn back time in your immune system to a younger self and a higher performance? And the answer is yes, you can, right? So as you may know, the sort of primordial cell of the immune system is the hematopoietic stem cell that gives rise to all white blood cells. So your entire immune system comes from there. And as we age, you can actually see physical changes to the hematopoietic stem cell. One of the things that is observed is that you have an accumulation of damaged mitochondria. And interestingly enough, our cells, they don't measure if you have enough mitochondria by the energy level, the ATP, which is the function of the mitochondria. They actually more measure like the absolute mass. So
Right.
What's the content of mitochondria in there? And so you can see if you're now in a scenario where your mitochondria is damaged and don't perform as much, they don't produce as much ATP per unit of time, if you will. The cell doesn't catch that if it's just laying around. And so if you can induce mitophagy, like reabsorption of some of these mitochondria, the cell then senses that, I have too little. And it actually starts biogenesis automatically of mitochondria. And these new mitochondria that pops up, they are functionally indistinct from mitochondria when you were 20. And so performance also goes up in the immune system. So you start seeing normalized tumor surveillance. You start seeing normalized response to a viral load. And you can all of a sudden start doing bone marrow passages, which is sort of the gold test for the strength of the immune system. And so when we do this in mice, we can take hematopoietic stem cells from very old mice, treat them with these compounds ex vivo, give them back to the mouse, and the immune system is now akin to a young mouse.
Wow.
Yeah, and so if you can do that in the human, you'll start seeing alleviation of a lot of these age-mediated diseases that pops up.
Yeah. So things like rheumatoid arthritis and sort of predominantly immune conditions like that, do you think?
Yeah, but interestingly enough, a lot of the big age-related diseases, be it neurodegenerative diseases or cardiovascular diseases, they actually have quite a foundation also in the immune system. So let's say a good 20, 25, 30% of that disease actually comes from an immune system that doesn't clear away debris that it should, etc. Yeah.
Oh, really fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Something that I also wanted to touch on, because ImmuneAGE has recently, sort of only 5 months ago, emerged from stealth mode. And so I wanted to dig a little bit into that. And from your experience, what's that like to be with a business as it emerges out into the world?
Yeah. So I mean, you coming out of stealth is typically sort of a move in your fundraising journey, right? Up until that point in time, you've had angel investors, or you've had VCs that's backing, sort of pre-seed funding, and you going out of stealth. Of course, that tells the world what you're doing. So it also sort of opens up competition in the sense that now others know the same thing. But ultimately, what you're hoping for is that move, that press release, will garner attention. And so typically, when you come out of stealth, you come out of stealth on the back of a successful fundraise or right
Yeah.
before you start fundraising. And for us, that also garnered attention from VCs and investors. So that's what you hope for. And of course, you need to balance this out against what you think is the competitive situation, right? Because you
Yes.
will be giving away that, okay, I'm focusing on these and these diseases, and there may be companies doing the same thing. But that's the nature of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of competitor analysis and strategic planning.
Yes.
Thank you for talking about that.
And I should say, like in this day and age, the struggle or the fight for funding is fierce, right? So you try and pull all the tricks you can to get a bit of media attention.
Yes.
It's these days it's just essential.
Yeah, plays a really important role.
Yeah.
So if I take you back to the early days, what was it about science that took your interest? How did you know that a career in this industry, particularly within drug discovery, was the right step for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been sort of scientifically inclined, a bit of the nerdy kid. Rather than playing with like action figures at home, I would be like taking things apart, or playing with Legos. Or I remember like actually liking to like solve math questions. So my mom would just write multiplication questions or whatever, and I liked sitting there and do that.
Oh, I love that.
So yeah, and I've never sort of been the athlete, right? I'm a skinny nerd, if you will. So my life early on sort of were more in that realm. Going to the library, I would pick up books on like how does a train work or whatever, right? And for the longest time, I actually thought that I would go into chemical engineering.
Okay.
It wasn't until my final year of high school, when we sort of in our biology classes, we had these theme weeks. So you would be going through different themes every week, and one of those weeks were stem cells, and I had never heard about it before. But I remember then when I heard about it, I was like, wow, one day we'll be able to grow an arm, or sort of replace any part of the body. I want to do that. And so it changed right then. All of a sudden I wanted to not be a chemical engineer anymore, and I wanted to be a stem cell researcher. And if you'd asked me back then, which is 20 plus years ago, where we would be today, I was certain that we would be able to like grow an arm today. But I understand now that we'll actually we'll have cities on Mars before we can actually make an arm.
Grow an arm.
Yes. But
I love that you can remember the moment that captured your passion, though. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually found my biology teacher many years later and told her that.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's so important that we make sure schools and education, that people get these opportunities to find their love like you did.
Exactly.
So you found your passion.
Yes.
You went to university. Let's talk a little bit about the choices you made for your education.
Yeah.
I know you went over to the US as well.
Yeah, I mean, for even before starting med school, I kind of knew that I wanted to do research. The plan was to run my own lab, right? So I was always moving through academia with the intention of becoming a professor and running my own group. And so as part of that, I also knew that I needed good publication. I needed to sort of have trained with the best. So and I was working hard, doing well in university. So I by the time we had to do the PhD, I was lucky enough to be able to do my PhD at Harvard Stem Cell Institute. And there again, I was working towards my publications and eventually getting my own research group. But what happened there, and I think this is probably a realization that a lot of aspiring scientists come to, is even in a place like Harvard, where you probably have the best funding situation in the world because you have the logo on the letterhead when you apply for grants. It's really about like, what do we strategically need to do research in so that we can publish a Nature paper every 2 years,
Yeah.
and apply for grant money based on that. It's not really like, what do we need to do to solve this disease. And I was a bit disheartened by that fact. You're flying the best brains on the planet, and we kind of know what we need to do to try and solve this disease, but no one is doing that because academia is not set up in a way where you can do like a 6-7 year push and with no applications, and then you solve it, and then you publish. And actually, even if we were to solve a disease tomorrow, we wouldn't get a Nature paper or a Cell paper. We would get like a Lancet paper, and I need a Nature or Cell paper to even be considered for faculty, right? And so to me, I realized that, man, I can't actually be, I will not be on a track to cure a disease here. I will not be able to develop something that ends up in a patient. This is much more about science for the sake of science, because that's ultimately, solving that strange curiosity of like, why does this small subpopulation of cells, 10% of cells, why don't they react like the 90% of cells when we give them compound A? That will give you a Cell paper, right? Whereas industry will say, well, if 90% of cells are doing X when we give them this compound, and the remaining 10% are not doing something bad, fantastic, screw it, launch it, put it on the market, right? And so I started to realize that, and then I was like, man, I've worked all these years to sort of position myself to become a professor, and now all of a sudden I realize that the only place where I can develop something for the patient is actually in industry, because only they will have sort of the financial muscle to stay with a program like that. And so I needed to pivot in my career, right? How do I now, in the fastest possible way, get to a place in industry where I can sort of set the course of the ship, if you will. And the traditional way, would be start as a research scientist and spend 25 years working your way up to CSO. Or you can try and see if you can join one of the top consultancies, and use that as your elevator to skip 10 years. And so during my PhD, in the last year or so of my PhD, I started like reading up on business at night, and that was a whole new world, right? Like the vocabulary and the way of thinking was quite different. But I mean, I then eventually interviewed with McKinsey, got in, and right after I defended my PhD, I then started with McKinsey and Company, focusing actually primarily on pharma. I mean, that doesn't mean that that's all I did. My first project in that company was actually that was like a private equity fund that needed a new bonus system for their employees, and so I had to do like 30-year projections of how different funds would develop in different economic scenarios, and then back calculate what would that mean in terms of carry bonuses and stuff. So very different from what I did, right?
So different, but I can see some transferable skills. Talk to me about how you use the transferable skills from science into the business strategy side of things.
Yeah, so I would say science is way harder than business. Business is actually quite, I would say, logical, whereas if you are in the biological sciences, it's not necessarily logical why a cell does X, Y, Z, right? Oftentimes, whatever happens in biology is kind of a black box. You know the initial receptor, and you maybe know some of the genes that describe in the end. You may also know some of the pathway, but it's that's just one pathway, and you kind of know from your transcriptional profile that 50 other pathways have also been involved here. Otherwise, I can't get this. And so, but conversely, business is very logical in the sense that you have a product, you need to find a buyer, and some resources will be spent putting that product together, right?
Yeah.
And it's and everything from there is like tips and scales. Like something goes up, something comes down, and so. Having worked in science, you are very sort of hypothesis based and logically driven, and that helped me a lot in my consulting career, because you are actually quite hypothesis based. The biggest difference, and it is a major difference when you come from academia and going into business school or consulting, is that everything in business deals with the future in some way. Right, and you can't predict the future, and so everything is uncertain. In academia, you do 1,000 tests so that your p-value is crisp, and you're certain that this is the answer, right? In business, it doesn't work like that. It will take you, let's say, a day to get to an 80% answer. But to get to 100%, to bridge those remaining 20%, that'll take you weeks, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so because time is money, you then stop around 80. And for a scientist, especially a PhD, making any conclusion at 80%, that was daunting in the beginning. Like, how can I go in and recommend, these big decisions or big changes when I'm not 110% sure, right? And that's actually how the real world works. And that was the biggest sort of change in the ways of working. But everything else, all the background and the methodology that you have from science will only help you when you get to the more businessy side of things.
Yeah. And how important is the plan B? Because often in business, you'll have the aim, the perfect, as close to perfect as you can predict, and then often there's a plan B option. When you're working in consultancy,
it's always dilemmas. It's always dilemmas. Like, nothing is ever perfect. It's always like a choice of X, Y, Z and a deselection of 1, 2, 3. Right. And so and in the end, it's always a leap of faith. We know that if we take option 3, we hope this will happen, but we also understand that we are deselecting these other things, and it comes with this and this risk.
Yeah, and balancing that out.
Yeah.
So we've talked about your move from your PhD into McKinsey into consultancy.
Yeah.
Talk me through the rest of your career, particularly the points that have been most formative.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I would say that in terms of my career, McKinsey was extremely formative in the sense that it really sort of teach you a methodology, and it teaches you a cadence, and it teaches you to live in a world of uncertainty, which as a scientist, man, that really bothers you. But you become sort of familiar with that, and also it teaches you a world where rather than having deadlines every quarter or whatever, you now have 20 deadlines per day, and it teaches you to go up and present on a daily basis, right? Not something that is trained that much in academia. I then also spent some time in venture capital, as a partner in a VC fund focusing on the longevity space. That meant that I sort of got a glimpse into the world of startups, and I could, being the buyer or the funder, I could then sort of see like what works, what doesn't work, what do you need to be mindful of, etc. So that was also quite good in I would say training me or preparing me to then be in the world of startups, seeing like how does a
Yeah.
VC think of these these
Yeah.
things. But I actually then joined Novo Nordisk in Denmark.
Yeah.
And with my background in cell therapy, I joined their cell therapy unit on the commercial side. So basically thinking about how to position this in the market, what kind of data do we need to show, what do the patients and the doctors care about, what's the
Yeah.
economics in this for both for a hospital and society, running some of those calculations, also like how do we need to train hospitals, right? Like what new infrastructure does hospitals actually need to have
Yeah.
to sort of do these new therapies that they're not used to before. Patient registries, all of a sudden, we some of these things, well, these things will stay in the body for
Mm.
forever, right? So we need to be able to track these patients for a long time. Like setting up all those systems was part of what I worked with. But as you also know, Novo is a very big company that they're making bank on obesity right now, and I mean they're doing so well on obesity that everything else in that company becomes very small,
Yeah.
just as as a sort of natural
Yeah.
consequence of that. So even though we had 4 programs in our pipeline. And even if all 4 programs were successful, because the obesity franchise is so successful, I mean, our revenue would be in the low single digits, right?
Like a drop in the ocean. Yeah.
A drop in the ocean, right? And so you can imagine that in an organization like that, it's then quite difficult to actually sort of get bandwidth
Yeah.
on your project, right? And so when I then had the opportunity of joining another Danish company that was like wholly focused on cell therapy, I took that opportunity. And
Yeah.
so in Novo, I was the global commercial director for the cell therapy franchise. But then when I moved to the smaller company, more focused on cell therapies, I became the chief business development officer there, focusing on basically building their therapeutic arm. They had sort of been in the cosmetics and beauty, plastic
Okay.
surgery applications before, and they would now wanted to go into therapeutics and osteoarthritis,
Yeah.
and I was sort of brought in to help them do that. But that was also then my foray into biotech startups.
Biotech.
So
Yeah.
this company was like 20 people, and they were on the fundraising journey. They already had revenue. They were selling their products. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, surely they're gonna be successful in the funding round, right? But actually, a year later, that company ended up going into reconstruction because
Right. Okay.
they just couldn't get the funding required for the expansion journey.
Yeah.
Um, and so by then I joined ImmuneAGE Bio, which I'd been on the advisory board of for several
Okay.
years. Joined them as COO there. While I was in Novo Nordisk, I also started a biotech startup with 4 of my friends in the cultivated meat space, Meat
Yeah.
Tomorrow. That was actually going well. We just raised 4.1 million Danish kroners, and so we're
Congratulations.
thank you very much. And so scaling out on the science part. But going forward, um, like I was on the business side there. If I were to sort of continue my track there, I would have to spend my 10,000 hours in really sort of learning about European and American food regulation,
Yes.
and I'll say in terms of interest, my interest is in pharma, right? So
Yes.
so
And the
that's sort of
science.
what I'll be focusing on. Yeah.
Yeah. But talk to me about the lesson. You've had such diverse
Yeah.
experience in pharma, in biotech, in VC and consulting.
Yeah.
Tell me about the lessons those experiences have taught you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say academia teaches you to sort of stand alone. You're kind of your own little unit, and you're working in isolation, especially as a PhD or a postdoc, right? So it teaches you, I guess, time management and discipline if you're running your own thing. As soon as you then switch to industry, you're now part of a team, right? There are deadlines, there are meetings, there are politics, there are fractions in the company that has more or less sway. There are people and committees that needs to be heard, that sometimes have absolutely no knowledge in your topic, but these are the processes that you have to follow, right? And so there are a lot of learnings in industry when it comes to, I would say, project governance, corporate structures, fiscal, the fiscal wheel of the year, like reporting budgets. All these things is not something that you're exposed to in academia, really, but it's something that actually takes up a lot of your time in industry. So in industry, things run a lot slower than you would ideally like, but there is a methodology implemented that has, I would say, slow but steady progress. There's always progress, and I would say, and this is also important to I think your listeners. There is really something to be in a large company and seeing that methodology in place. It's not a perfect methodology, but that methodology of like having meetings set up in a certain way, with a certain sequence, having different governance structures, working with different functions in the company. There is a lot to actually having experienced that methodology, and learn that, so that when you, for instance, go to a smaller company or join a startup or whatever, you can then take that methodology with you and use it. Because what I've also seen in startups where like no one have been in either consulting or large companies, like if that methodology isn't there, it's actually quite hard to implement a system where there's structure, and where people work efficiently. So if I were to give a recommendation, it would actually be to, like, if you're coming out of academia now, and you're thinking about, like, should I join a big company or a small company, like, or a startup, right? Really actually now think about joining the large company as a starter, just to get that methodology in, just to be exposed to more of the life of the life cycle of a project, or a product, right? If you are a startup, you're probably just thinking about the science or the early clinical development. And
quite short-term goals.
And you are completely blinded to anything commercial. And I can promise you, like, if you haven't thought about who's gonna buy this, and what are the criteria that they will be looking at, and what's important to them, and if you haven't thought about, like, production, manufacturing, you will wake up to some very, very harsh realizations later in your startup journey, where you'll be like, shit, if only I thought about that 2 years ago, right? But now
you could have changed the path. You could have done things slightly differently.
Exactly. So go spend a few years in a large corporation. You'll sort of see things that's been done, sort of in the best possible ways, and you'll see things that are hugely inefficient, and you take both those things with you in your future career. Also, like, if if you're keen on sort of exploring a broader swath of business, trying your hand at consulting for a few years, management consulting, is also a good idea. I mean, certainly you'll be exposed to all sorts of sectors, and all sorts of problems that corporations and companies are facing.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Almost gather yourself a blueprint. Take the advice, learn who's been there before. They do it that way because they've rinsed and they've repeated and they know it works, right?
Another thing, another key learning is just how important sponsors is in your journey, right? Like you need to find 1-2 people that sort of really believes in you, that sees what you can do and sees your potential, and basically carries you through the company. I know it sounds strange, and in an ideal world, you should be able to just get through purely on your merits. That's not really how it works. Someone needs to basically mention you, and basically like do a bit of marketing for you in the company, right? And so finding that sponsor early in your career is extremely important, and also see if you can find some mentors. I mean, these are all quite informal things, right? It's not. In some companies have it implemented in bona fide structures, but in many companies, it's not something that's put in place per se. It's but a lot of people, if you come to them as a junior person, and you say like, oh, I looked you up. You have had an incredible career. The stuff that you're working with now is hugely fascinating. Even though I'm in this other function, very few people will then just say, okay, fine. Right. So
it's human nature to want to help, to be nurturing and supportive for most of us, isn't it?
Yes. And I will say, like, when you get to a certain point in your career, you're kind of there, and what you then take joy in is actually putting your footprint on the next sort of cohort of talents, right? But never underestimate just how important sponsors are in your career.
Have you ever had mentors that are outside of the business that you're currently working in? Have you ever made connections outside?
Not formally. And it's probably one of the things that I realized too late, actually, that that I should have done. I should have done so. I mean, it's you're in some ways you're also, I mean, when you're going through academia, you think of these hotshot professors as people that you can't approach, that you can't talk to, and that kind of stays a little bit with you. Like, oh, I can't possibly send that person an email, right? But if I were to give myself, my younger self, a piece of advice, I would say, like, just do it. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? I wish I had done it earlier in my career. I think the young people nowadays are much more open to it, and and they've heard it. It was kind of late in my career that I even heard about these things, and now it's common knowledge, but it really wasn't that 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I think in that way, sort of things like social media, and the world has become smaller. People are better connected. You still have to have that self-belief and that confidence that you're not bothering people, that people will want to help you to take that step there, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome.
So I suppose to kind of conclude, we've touched on a little bit about where ImmuneAGE Bio are now. What's next? What's next for them and for you, Josef?
Yeah, so I mean, we are trying to raise our seed round, and we we need that round to do our pre-IND work.
Yeah.
So we kind of know what we need to do. We need to do the PMPK tests and all that stuff. But of course that costs money, right? And so we hope that we are able to do that fundraise at a certain point in time. If that's dragging out, then we, like many other companies, will have to figure out, are there certain things that we can ramp down to elongate our runway, with the hopes of then sort of toughening it out until funding arrives. And if that doesn't, then me and the rest of the team will have to try and find something else to do. But this is the risk that you take on when you go into a startup. It's high risk, high reward. There is it's a fun ride for persons that are willing to take on some risk, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also, I will never look down on people that that doesn't want to go that route, because people can be at a stage in their life where let's say there's a child coming or whatever, and you need stability, right? You don't want to take on that risk. I completely understand, and at the moment it is tough. There's no doubt at all that times are difficult for startups at the moment. There is not a lot of funding around, and a lot of very, very good and impressive startups are folding these years, not because the data is not good, but because there just isn't a lot of capital flying around. Right? So we, like many others, are hoping that we'll be able to do our seed round.
Yeah. Well, I really am hoping for the best. Like you said, you've got preparations and you're being strategic and you've got plans to extend that runway. So hopefully times will turn and you'll be fortunate.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your fantastic advice and your career story. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium or TikTok. See you next time.